What is stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination? In the first few lectures, you learned that social behavior is determined by a number of lenses, including our personal experience, our social identity, and cultural and societal norms. Each of these lenses is slightly biased. They represent a limited perspective of the world. In this lecture, you'll explore the role that stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination play in human psychology. Stereotypes, for example, shape our personal experiences, leading us to engage in certain activities but not others. Our personal experiences, in turn, shape our stereotypes, leading us to confirm some beliefs but not others. All three impact us and our interpretation of others' behaviors, both of which then shape our stereotypes and prejudice. All three operate interdependently. That is, stereotypes underlie prejudice and discrimination, and discrimination involves stereotyping and often prejudice. But the three can operate independently. For instance, some people hold undesirable stereotypes, but do not act upon them. The content of stereotypes varies from culture to culture. Starting in childhood, we learn the stereotypes associated with social groups, which are informal collections of people with something in common. And each of us belongs to many groups. For example, we can be categorized according to our age, race, gender, sexuality, religion, economic class, marital status, physical ability, political ideology, and location, or our physical qualities like height, weight, clothing, tattoos, piercings, and hair color, or our occupation, hobbies, and even our favorite sports team. By the time most of us reach young adulthood, we are keenly aware of the stereotypes associated with all kinds of groups. The content of stereotypes also changes over time. Consider how gender stereotypes in the workplace have changed in the last 75 years. For example, prior to World War I, women in the U.S. were expected to maintain the home, not run a business. Today, women make up half of the workforce, and the stereotype that women cannot lead is slowly eroding. Within individuals, however, stereotypes are resistant to change. Once we become aware of them, it's hard to unlearn them. Social psychologists define stereotypes as beliefs or associations that link a social group with a specific characteristic. These generalizations are applied to the whole social group and to an individual whom we perceive to be a representative of the group. Here are a few examples of stereotypes that have personally affected me. As you read each example, fill in the blank with a characteristic that you've learned to associate with the group. 1. Brunettes are, fill in the blank. 2. People who have tattoos are, fill in the blank. 3. Millennials are, fill in the blank. If I polled 100 people, I'd hear a variety of answers. That's because we belong to different groups and have unique life experiences, both of which shape the stereotypes we hold. Are stereotypes true? No, because there will always be exceptions to the rule. Are some people stereotype congruent? Yes, but we shouldn't expect everyone to have a certain quality just because they belong to a certain social group. The problem is, stereotypes impact us even when we don't agree with them, and they can be activated without our awareness. Simply knowing that a stereotype exists can activate it when we are exposed to a member of the stereotyped group. Recall that we learn these beliefs through our unique experiences, at home, at school, at work, in our neighborhood, and through media. The definition of this construct has evolved since it was first studied in the 1920s, and since Gordon Allport published his famous book in the 1950s. Today, social psychologists define prejudice as a negative attitude about a social group and its members. This attitude includes 3 parts. A cognitive component. This is where stereotypes play a role in prejudice. There's also an affective part. In fact, some researchers define prejudice as a negative feeling. And then, there's the behavioral piece, our intentions to behave in accordance with our thoughts and feelings. Some types of prejudice are more acceptable than others, something that varies from culture to culture. In the U.S., prejudice that is based on personal qualities, like race and physical ability, is low in acceptability. But prejudice between professional sports teams is more tolerated. And one of the most acceptable forms of prejudice in the U.S. is played out on televisions and social media every day. The negative feelings between the two major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. Social psychologists define discrimination as an unfair behavior or unequal treatment that's directed toward a person because of their connection to a social group and/or because they are perceived to hold some arbitrary trait. Examples include harassment, inappropriate jokes, insults, offensive slurs, intentional avoidance, and acts of aggression or violence. Sociologists introduced the concept of institutional discrimination. This includes the social and institutional practices that negatively affect outgroup members. One example is the tendency for managers to hire and promote people who are similar to them, instead of people who are best suited for the job. Over time, this organizational practice creates a homogeneous workplace. These managers may not even realize they do it. The similarity effect is a human tendency that impacts all of us. This practice is especially problematic when the most qualified person is part of the outgroup. They're being passed over due to bias, not merit or performance. Because social psychologists are interested in the individual's experience of social situations, they are especially focused on studying stigmatization, or the experience of being targeted by negative stereotypes. People who are stigmatized are perceived to be deviant and undervalued in society, simply because of their membership in a social group. They are especially susceptible to stereotype threat, which you'll learn more about later in this lecture. The results of countless studies suggest that stigmatized individuals are at an increased risk for a number of unfortunate outcomes, like high blood pressure, depression, cancer, diabetes, stroke, respiratory problems, chronic pain, and substance abuse. At the end of the lecture, you'll explore some of the ways we can reduce the prevalence of this experience. For now, we'll continue defining important terms. In the next section, you'll explore two specific types of prejudice and discrimination, racism and sexism.